Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today on driving change, designing and financing transportation electrification projects. My name is Simbiat Yusuf. I am the Member Relations Manager at Fourth, and I will be joining you as the moderator for our webinar today. Our speakers will highlight current funding sources and partnerships to get transportation electrification programs in communities. Before we start off our presentations today, we have a few announcements from the Fourth team. Attendees, we ask that you please submit your questions through the attendee chat. We will get through them during the Q&A portion of our presentation today. We will also be sharing the webinar slides and presentation and recording after the webinar. So please stay tuned for that. If you miss anything, just let us know and we will get you the information. And I know you all, most of you have been here with us before, but as always, we like to start with just a little refresher on Fourth, who we are and what we do. Fourth is a nonprofit trade association advocating for smart transportation. We work in four main focus areas, which are industry development, demonstration projects, policy advocacy, and consumer engagement. And through these efforts, we aim to support and advance clean, equitable transportation for all. And our webinars would not be possible without the support of our members and sponsors. If you would like to learn more about membership and sponsorship opportunities at Fourth or visibility at the upcoming webinars, we have many more topics to come just in the spring and winter season. Please feel free to reach out to myself. You can see my email on screen, simbiaty@fourthmobility.org. And some updates on the virtual roadmap conference happening June 14th through the 16th in 2021. We've just announced our Mobility for All sponsorship scholarship application is currently open. This scholarship provides access to individuals from community-based organizations that are working in the equity and transportation electrification space. We're also accepting nominations for the third annual Fourth Roadmap Awards. You can nominate individuals or organizations advancing transportation in these categories. We have the public sector leadership, private sector leadership, community partnership, research, career achievement, and impactful adaptation. If you would like to know more information about roadmap, tickets, sponsorship, member discounts, you can reach out to Ashley Duplanty, Fourth's International Marketing Manager, or find more information on the website roadmapfourth.org. We will also make sure to include the links to the scholarship and the awards in the recap email as well. Our speakers today are Sam Schanfarber, Dan Janosec, Maurice Muia, and Mark Smith. And in lieu of reading bios today, we've asked our speakers on how they began their clean transportation journey. Attendees, if you would like to participate, you can just write us in the attendee chat what your clean transportation story is or where you're coming in from today. We would like to get to know everyone on the webinar today. Sam previously worked with startups in Boulder, Colorado. He recognized transportation as an industry ready for innovation and disruption, and he joined Fourth in 2020 to manage our pursuits in the Southwest region. Welcome to the team, Sam, and Sam is a program manager at Fourth. Dan is the grants manager at Portland General Electric. His introduction to transportation electrification came from his original work in renewables. He managed a renewable energy grant and was asked to design a new transportation electrification grant that focused on environmental justice communities. In an effort to better serve customers, his position was created to manage all technical grant making at Portland General Electric, including the newly formed Drive Change Fund, which he will be discussing during his presentation today. Maurice was introduced to electric vehicles in 2008 at his High Performance Materials Institute at the Florida State University. His team built a carbon fiber composite electric vehicle at the university and took it to the Daytona Speedway, and he's been hooked ever since. We'll add a little bit of his poster in our recap email so you can see what he worked on. And finally, we have Mark Smith. Mark Smith has been involved in sustainable transportation for more than 20 years. He was at a stage in his life where he was looking for a career change. And while no particular job or industry was in mind, he did have some personal and professional criteria that were very important to him. And through a number of somewhat unrelated circumstances, an opportunity presented itself, and he hasn't had a regret since. So Mark is now the Technology Integration Program Manager at the U.S. Department of Energy. Another warm up for our attendees today, we have a poll question for you all. Our poll question today is, what industry do you represent? Attendees, please participate. And if you don't see your industry on the poll, you can just let us know in the attendee chat, what industry are you representing? We have a lot of NGOs, academia, and real estate. We'll close the poll now so we can get to the details of our webinar today. We want our speakers to have a lot of time to engage with you all and a bunch of time for Q&A afterwards. And with that, I will pass it along to the first presenter of the day. Sam, take it away.
Thanks, Simbi. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. As Simbi mentioned, I'm Sam Schanfarber. I'm a program manager at Forth, actually based in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and have been managing our pursuits here in the Southwest coming up on about a year. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about how we as the business development team at Forth design and find funding for TE projects. So before I get into the nuts and bolts of how we go about doing this, I wanted to give a quick overview of how this team is actually structured, because I think it's important to wrap your head around how we work. So our business development team is comprised of 4 staff members, and each of us has kind of varied backgrounds, but predominant strengths are in writing and communication, project management, and sales. And you can see how these would come in handy when you consider the responsibilities of the team. So we pursue RFPs and grants as they roll out. We also manage relationships with partners and funders. And finally, we're responsible for scoping and building out these new pilots. So there's really 2 paths to designing pilots at Forth. And the secret sauce, so to speak, is a constant communication between our programs team and our fundraising team. So essentially, the first path would be designing a pilot around a funding opportunity. And you're really going to see this take shape when you see, say, requests for proposals come out at the municipal or state level. So we'll see, for example, a municipality that's looking to do an EV readiness plan. And so we'll tailor our response for a pilot around exactly what they're looking for within that request for proposals. So pretty straightforward, a client's looking for a specific type of outcome, and we will design a pilot that we think will achieve that outcome and then apply for funding. Now, the other path for designing a pilot is coming up with an idea internally and then seeking funding to actually launch the pilot. So this is a good example of how those integrations with our program team and fundraising team really come into play. We may have a program manager who has previously been working on a funded pilot. and say, this could really have some legs under it if we chose to scale. So we'll then work with that program manager to design a pilot and seek funding around it. And this often comes in the form of fee-for-service work. So, for example, we might take something that worked well for a municipal client in a request for proposal and then reformat it to essentially be sold to a client that's willing to pay for it up front. So I want to talk a little bit about the two different ways that Fourth shows up on applications for funding. And those are as prime applicants or as subcontractors or subprime applicants. And essentially what that means is we are either the lead on the team that's seeking to integrate a pilot, or a subcontractor will have a much smaller role. And there's a couple of different things to consider when we're looking at funding opportunities, when we're considering whether we want to be a prime or a sub. So just running through this, the advantages of being a prime, we really get the ability to guide the project direction. We're the ones putting the team together. We can figure out, amongst previous contacts that we've worked with, who's really going to have the best complementary strengths for this given opportunity. Obviously, you end up with the lion's share of the budget if you're going to be the prime on a project as well. Something to consider here, you get a lot of exposure with the client and in press opportunities if you're the prime. So if there's a press release that comes out about the project, typically you're going to see the prime applicant be the one to speak on behalf of the project implementers. And you also get more face time with the client themselves. So whether it's municipal or a federal funder, you're going to be the one that's on the call with them, updating them monthly, quarterly, what have you. And finally, you just generate more experience this way. So you're getting to learn really from each of the subcontractors that you've brought in. And not only that, you get to see really each of the different facets of the project come into play. And then there's a couple drawbacks to this as well. So, contractor management, anybody who's worked in a project like this knows that it can be hard to wrangle cats, so to speak. This is potentially a positive depending on your organization, but you do tend to have a full-time staffer on a pilot if you're the prime. So it just takes up more resources. And on that resource topic, you're probably going to be the ones to contribute the most amount of time putting together an application. So you're going to be using resources up front before you've even been allocated funding. And finally, depending on the opportunity, you can probably only show up on a single application as a prime, which brings me to subcontracting. One of the big things that we've done at Fourth is recognize an opportunity where we may not be able to manage the full project and are approached by multiple firms that would be the prime. And the benefit, obviously, is that we can take our specific expertise set and, if we're not exclusive with one prime, be able to show up on multiple applications as the implementer of one small component of that pilot project. So again, we get to play up our strengths. It's really easy to write and put these things together. And we have a good shot at showing up on a winning team for a pilot. Some of the drawbacks are, directly related to the advantages of being a prime. So, you have less control over project direction. You're not going to get as much of the budget. And really, we're stuck to our specific set of expertise that we're coming into the project with. We're probably not going to take as much away from it as a firm if we're a sub. So a couple examples of past pilots that we've run. We have the Silvers program in St. Louis, which we're actually working a bit with Maurice on. And that's an initiative to bring clean and affordable transportation to underserved communities within St. Louis. The Fourth EV Showcase is a federally funded project from the DOE where we have a brand agnostic showroom for electric vehicles in downtown Portland. And it's worth mentioning each of these is actually an instance where Fourth is a prime. So we've been able to have lots of different experience sets come out of these different projects. And the final pilot I'll talk to here is our multi-unit dwelling toolkit. So this is again a DOE funded project to develop tools to allow multi-unit dwelling managers and owners to put in EV charging. And then zooming in again on a current pilot that we're running. So Fourth is currently involved in a clean tractors project where we're putting e-tractors into rural farms. So really interesting rural outreach initiative. It can be very challenging to get electric vehicles into rural communities. And this is a pilot we've developed with, as you can see, a handful of partners to put this together. A couple things that make this interesting. I think one, again, is the plethora of partners here, and each really has a strength that they bring to this. So Fourth is a technical advisor for the tractors themselves. We have folks that work within the communities that we're trying to serve because, frankly, they just understand the needs of these farming communities better than we do. And then, of course, have funding partners here as well. And then something else interesting about this is the considerations you have to take in for scaling a pilot like this. So getting all these ducks in a row for the initial pilot is tough enough, but then you have to ask these kinds of chicken and egg questions about, okay, we'd like to take this pilot and move it into other regions. Are we going to need to find a farm that's willing to participate first? Do we need to identify a geographic region that's going to benefit the most? And then what about funding? And of course, you can answer each of these questions easier if you know the answers to the others. So that's one of the challenges thinking about scaling a program, even if it's highly successful. How do you identify the first step in growing this initiative? So I will stop there and pass off to the next speaker. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sam. And just as Sam teased, our Etractor project, if you would like to learn more about our Etractor project, our fabulous Erin Gallagher will be presenting on that on our April 13th Bridging the Gap webinar. And now we'll hear from Dan at Portland General Electric.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, everybody at Fourth for setting this up. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are physically or mentally, not one to judge. I'll be going through, my name is Dan Janosec. I'll be going through the Drive Change Fund that I have the honor of managing at Portland General Electric. I'm happy to answer any and all questions you might have. So the Drive Change Fund, the main focus is we're looking to advance transportation electrification in our most vulnerable communities here in Oregon. We're looking to have these benefits have a really community benefit more than anything else. So we're really focused on making sure that we're driving whatever the dollars that we can provide for these projects back into the communities, especially communities that don't have access to funding or the innovations normally. The funding itself comes from the sale of clean fuels credits via the DEQ's Oregon Clean Fuels Program. So PGE is a participant in that, and we get a percentage of those credits, and then we're able to monetize them in a variety of different ways, one of them being the Drive Change Fund. It is available at a 100% funding, so it's focused mostly on nonprofits, just because we feel like that is an easier one-to-one to know that those fund dollars are going towards projects and going to benefit people directly, as opposed to not seeing that clear path to actual impacts that we need to see. As with any kind of competitive grant process, there is a lot more requests than there is available funds. Unfortunately, we've had about $20 million of ask over the last 2 years and only $5 million available to give out. It's great to see that there's interest, and it's great to see that people are wanting to innovate in their communities. We just got to find more change somewhere to give them, which is a good problem to have ultimately, I think. We are guided mostly by 6 program design principles. I'll show you that on the next slide. We have a really diverse group of stakeholders from the PUC, the Utility Commission here in Oregon, to local businesses and nonprofit organizations, wanting to make sure that these dollars are being utilized responsibly. As you can see on the other side of my slide, what the project types are, and ultimately that community benefit, this benefiting of environmental justice communities, ends up being the most important thing that we can do with these dollars and being responsible stewards of those. We range anywhere from electric vehicle acquisition and installing of charging infrastructure. Education and awareness is still really important. A lot of these communities aren't even aware of the ability of electric vehicles. They might not know the latest model, or they might not be aware of the many ways they can impact them. Sam just mentioned electric tractor. I mean, that might not even be a thought in some people's minds. So we really want to get the word out of what's possible, what's available. And finally, innovative projects, trying to say, be creative. We want to be supporting these projects and these organizations to make sure whatever that they choose fits for them. Make sure that the money works for the communities and the programs they're trying to fund. I think that ends up being really crucial. As I said, these are the program design principles. So we really try to use these as the jump off point for the structure of the Drive Change Fund. Obviously, we want to electrify the electrification sector beyond everything else. That's the biggest one. We want to drive those benefits to residential customers. This is funded by residential customers, so those benefits need to flow back to them ultimately. But more focus again on those underserved communities if at all possible. It's been overwhelmingly successful, and I think that's in part due to the support system we've built externally, but certainly internally, which I'll get to here in a second. It's really about collaboration. As a utility, we have a lot of different groups that touch our customer base, and we try to make sure that we're utilizing all those touch points and all those relationships so that we're finding the organizations that have that community buy-in and that are connected to those individual people. So the diversity, equity, and inclusion team is great for that because of their existing relationships, because of the focus of their work. We can leverage some of their existing contacts and let them know about the funding opportunities. Government affairs, in a different way, the municipalities are still a support system for a lot of these populations as well. So if we can get municipal involvement, municipal applicants, that's something that we can share with them. That helps, a broad swath of people where, maybe a community-based organization or a nonprofit is focused specifically on one subset of a population. And then the community impact team that I'm a part of, we have an existing philanthropy arm in the PGE Foundation with a similar applicant pool, so we can use those contacts and those experiences to build out our outreach list. And then just be a trusted brand. We're still a utility, so people maybe don't think about PGE as a leader in TE, but we are, and we continue to try to be that leader. So if we can change the perception of what PGE can be and how we can support communities, I think that helps lift all these people up, but also allows us to show our support in a really meaningful and impactful way. Be that dollars, be that technical expertise, be that connections to other similar grant funding mechanisms. To go really quickly over our application review, so we have an initial screen. It's a competitive application that's live on our website. In that 2-month period, we do a lot of emails, phone calls, meetings, webinars to get people up to speed. And then we do an initial screen to make sure that what they applied for was eligible. We have documents to back that up. We do an application review with myself and a third-party evaluator, looking at just the feasibility. Can this happen as designed? The benefits, making sure it's really driving those benefits to those environmental justice communities we want to see. And then, cost. Does it check all the boxes to make sure that it's a good value for the cost? We go through interviews. We do an in-depth evaluation, a scoring rubric. And finally, we present and select those with an internal selection committee across the company, trying to get different perspectives. We want to make sure that the committee is representative of the communities we're serving. I think that's really important. Nothing for us without us. So we have a group think to make sure that we are supporting these organizations properly. Then ultimately, we get approval and pay out 75% of the dollars upfront, support throughout the year as the project's being built, and then 25% on the back end upon completion and inspection. So we really don't want this to be a burden on the upfront. We think having dollars in the beginning, you don't have to raise money as a small nonprofit. There's capital costs that might be really burdensome. We really want to give the money to the organization and allow them to run with it. and do all the things that they think are best for their programs or for their programs and for their people. I think that's people above all, especially the focus of this fund. Some of our preferences, we like to see full battery versus plug-in hybrids. We think the full battery gives us the best benefits, the largest amount of impact. Direct engagement versus services. So instead of delivering food to people, delivering people to appointments. That way they're interacting with the vehicles directly and they're learning a lot more. They're engaging a lot more. We also would prefer projects that align with the mission of the organization. Not in an add-on, but maybe a new way to support, to free up dollars to serve more people or serve a different group of people because of this project. So we have some requirements, but there's some ways we prefer to see this money utilized that we think can be really impactful. And I want to highlight two projects really quickly that I think really encompass that. So the first is NAYA, it's a Native American Youth and Family Center. So you can tell by their name, they are focused on the Native American population, especially youth and families in their communities. This group here in Oregon certainly is underserved. There's not a focus of enough time and effort. So a project like this allows them to get new vehicles for after school services, for programs, for appointments, or anything like that. So get to replace their current gas vehicles with electric vehicles, saving them a lot of money and obviously a lot of environmental benefits. So we were happy and proud to partner with them, and they have vehicles on the road right now, which is super exciting. And finally, in my last few seconds here, I want to highlight the City of Roses project. City of Roses is a waste management company based in Portland. So they are actually going to get an electric garbage truck, essentially, to run their routes, allowing them more opportunities to bid for more projects, so they can get more work. Also allows them to, they clean up the environments they're working for, or the communities they're working in. And this is a big difference than, a Nissan Leaf, which is a great application, but this is new and fresh, and we're really excited about supporting something like this. So I'm happy to take some questions in the chat, and thank you for the opportunity and the time.
Thank you so much, Dan, and really excited to see more heavy-duty projects taking shape and hitting the road. And our third speaker today will be hearing from Maurice on NRDC's goal in St. Louis. Hey, Maurice.
Hello, good day, everybody. My name is Maurice Muia, and today I'll be talking to you about, of course, designing and financing transportation electrification programs. And I'll give you a little bit of a background about the Silver story. And Silver's stands for St. Louis Vehicle Electrification Rides for Seniors. So I'll give you a little bit of background on that. So there are three keys to designing these programs. One, community. Next, capacity. And of course, you have to execute. So throughout this presentation, I'll show you the three attributes and how they're essential for a community-focused transportation electrification program. So within a community, so for example, we're here in St. Louis, right? So who are we serving, for example, right? Are we serving a particular age group? Are we serving a particular community that's underserved? Do we have seniors? Do we have a transit community? Are people unemployed? Are they homebound, right? Who are you serving here? So, and also, what are the needs for the people in these communities, right? Are you trying to provide healthy nutrition? Are you trying to provide exercise, legal services, take them to non-emergency medical appointments, or even community events, for example? I know with COVID-19, this has been particularly tough, but in a couple slides, I'll show you how programs like these will help people even in times, of course, like a pandemic, even with restrictions in place. So what type of roadblocks do you have, right? Why does this program not exist currently? Who do you engage, and why are you going to engage them for this type of work? And also, you have to make sure you communicate this well with the community. Sometimes you may have barriers as far as language or even technological barriers. So do you have people in your community that speak another language? for example, in South St. Louis, during the Bosnia-Herzegovina conflict, there were a lot of people that came over from there, from Georgia and Bosnia, and well, what was Bosnia, and they came and settled in South St. Louis, right? So how does that look like with communicating these type of projects in the long term? The place that this is, the program, where the program is taking place, right? Is this an underpopulated area of the city? Is this an overpopulated area of the city? Are you meeting the needs of the residents? And can it excel where you're trying to do this program? And also, in the end, with learnings that we get, can it be replicated in other jurisdictions, right? Can be replicated in other municipalities in the St. Louis area? Can be replicated in Missouri or even across the country? So capacity. I really like the capacity part because this really lets you know if you're going to be successful or not. So municipal government participation, right? So I'm part of the American Cities Climate Challenge, and one of our goals was to reduce carbon emissions across the city. And the two areas of focus were buildings and transportation. So when it came to market transformation in terms of transportation electrification, we had some struggles with figuring out what we wanted to do in that space. So Fourth is actually part of the challenge as a support partner on the challenge, and they helped us identify a program through the Department of Energy. And this program explicitly was for transportation electrification in underserved communities. And we had that in the city of St. Louis. So we partnered with Fourth, they led on the application, and we partnered with an agency called St. Louis Area Agency on Aging. And they are basically a pass-through funder that meets the needs of those that are of a greater age in the city of St. Louis and those that are disabled in the city of St. Louis. So we worked with them to identify existing transportation programs that we could essentially electrify. We also worked with community development corporations. I don't know how much everyone knows about CDCs, but they play an important role in different places within the municipality where the municipality may not have all the resources they need to provide the services to the residents. So CDCs essentially fill a gap. Some of the gaps may be housing, community development, explicitly in terms of finance, housing, and other things, but even sometimes safety, providing safety services to a degree. So we partner with a community development corporation in a historically significant neighborhood, the Greaterville neighborhood, in the city of St. Louis. And they helped us a lot with developing what this needs to look like as far as communications between the program management staff and also the residents that live there. And also nonprofit organizations that fill the gaps. So we partnered with two nonprofit organizations that provide transportation services to seniors. Advocacy organizations like NRDC, Fourth, and others. The local energy company, we've partnered with Ameren. We've also fundraised with Ameren. And there are even incentive programs that are helping us out with funding the program. So even the timing is good in what we're trying to do. And of course, securing federal agency grants. So we secured a grant from the DOE, which is a one-to-one match. So $500,000. And so we're able to take this $1 million project and serve a lot of people in a very defined location. Next, execution. So, one of the things with execution, for example, you want to make sure that your scope is sufficient for what you want to do. You don't want to have scope creep. In the first year, which is what we're working with right now with Fourth, how do we develop a program that could be sustainable for the next 2 years for this 3-year program? So how do we make sure we meet the needs of the community while balancing the restrictions that we have as an organization, or well, not as an organization, as a program that's split over many entities? Is our timeline satisfactory? One of the things we heard in the communities that we went in to develop this program, especially in North St. Louis, we don't want you to come in and then just leave, right? That happened many times. So we made sure that the program is sufficient in time. It's a 3-year program. There's certain pieces of infrastructure that will remain. For example, the electric vehicle supply equipment will remain after the program is complete. But if you think about it, we are creating a relationship between Northside Senior Center and City Seniors Inc. with Fourth, for example, with the U.S. Department of Energy, and also with Ameren, and relationships that they did not have in the past. They have applied to Ameren Foundation grants, and they haven't received any. And now they're in the process of submitting their application to receive those funds. So we've created new relationships, possibly new funding streams in the future after this program, to make this program sustainable once it's complete. And also, of course, is your budget adequate for success, right? Do you have enough money to essentially run this program and be successful in every year while you're reporting to the DOE and while you're making sure that you're keeping in communications with the people that you're serving? And I think once you answer these questions, the program could run as intended for the duration. I wanted to mention one thing specifically about Northside Youth and Senior Services Center. So in 2020, during the pandemic, they delivered 165,000 meals to, I think, about 1,300 distinct residents in the city of St. Louis. And that was a 30% increase over 2019. So this just goes to tell us that programs like these are definitely beneficial for people, because if we can provide services for meals that keep people healthy, take them to legal services that keep them engaged with what they need in their lives, take them to doctor's appointments, take them to vaccinations. If we can do all of that through transportation electrification, then we've done our job. This is just a means and a method to make people's lives better. So I hope I gave you a good tidbit of what Silvers is about. And I hope if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. And I'm glad to see everyone here today. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Maurice. I'm looking forward to seeing everything, the Silvers program, and seeing it in its full-blown potential. And our final speaker today, Mark Smith, will be covering the US DOE information. So, Mark, can you give us your presentation now?
I sure can. Thank you. Pleasure to be here with everybody. And it's really my colleagues on the panel have made this very easy, Sam and Dan and Maurice, because they mentioned a number of DOE projects. I apologize for the having some video problems here today and not able to connect. So apologize that you can't see me, but maybe for some of you who know me, you may be thinking, well, that's even better. At any rate, I want to give you an overview of the Technologies Integration Program at the Department of Energy, which includes our Clean Cities initiative. And Clean Cities plays an important part in many of our funding opportunities, getting onto the street and getting out to you, the stakeholders, but also in giving us feedback on what's needed. So before I jump into that, I thought for benefit here, I'd just take a minute or two just to kind of talk about what we do in the technology integration program and how we work. This slide's a couple years old, but I doubt it has changed much since 2018. But we can see that electrification for transportation is still very small. So that's the bad news. The good news is we all have job security. So the technology integration program is part of the Vehicle Technologies Office at DOE. And I really look at what we do in technology integration as the outreach and deployment for many of these other sub-programs you see listed here. Our program spans four major areas: batteries and electrification, which is exactly what it sounds like. How do we continue to do a lot of work with industry to bring down battery costs and help increase the range of electric vehicles? That also gets into charging, looking at things like not only DC fast charging today, but extreme fast charging, 350 kilowatts and up. We're also still continuing to do work in the internal combustion engine as the internal combustion engine continues to they become cleaner and smaller and more fuel efficient. We do a lot of work in the materials sector, really looking at lightweighting of vehicles, not trying to make vehicles smaller, but how do you use materials like high strength steels and aluminum and carbon fiber that can make a vehicle lighter and more energy efficient, but still keep the safety and the structural integrity. And then one of our newest areas of work is energy efficient mobility systems, or EAMS as we call it. We wouldn't be good government employees without our acronyms. And EAMS is really looking at, or energy efficient mobility systems, is really now looking at transportation as a system. So really trying to understand the impacts of ride sharing, car sharing, connected and automated vehicles, and what those look like if they're all electrified. And then as I mentioned, in technology integration, we're really that outreach, education, and deployment arm to really help make sure that these new technologies, as one of my colleagues likes to say, make it out of the lab and over that infamous valley of death and into the field, into the marketplace. And of course, all this hinges around making the transportation sector, whether it's business, commercial, or passenger cars, more energy efficient. So within the technology integration program, a couple different buckets. Over on the right-hand side are two things. We do have a regulatory bent to what we do. We follow from EPAC 1992, something called the State and Alternative Fuel Provider Fleets. EPAC 92 required that these fleets, through the course of normally replacing vehicles, do those with alternative fuel or advanced technology vehicles. Then we also have our advanced vehicle technology competitions, or EcoCar. Some of you might be familiar with the EcoCar program. That's under technology integration. Over to the left-hand side with those four circles and clean cities in the middle, probably the main buckets of work within technology integration. Talked about training and outreach and developing partnerships, information and tools. Some of you might be familiar with our alternative fuel data center, which has a wide variety of tools and resources. The alt fuel station locator, laws and incentives, a number of case studies. So a lot of good resources to draw upon. Down in that bottom, kind of that 4 or 5 o'clock area, is our technical response service. We find that a lot of the challenges of these new technologies is not just that initial kind of leap to get them into commercialization and into demonstration projects. But oftentimes we find some of these technologies, once they've been deployed for a while, there can be some issues that need to be addressed. And so that technical response service helps us do that. And then financial assistance, which are competitive solicitations that I'll talk about. But all those we have around the Clean Cities program, because our nationwide network of Clean Cities coalitions are really integral in making sure that these resources get out to all of their stakeholders. We're fuel and agnostic neutral. We cover all the EPAC mandated alternative fuels that you can see listed there, and we do everything from light duty vehicles to Class 8 vehicles. Semi trucks and buses and garbage trucks, as has been discussed, and then looking now at transportation as a system through our EAMS group. This is our network of Clean Cities coalitions. For those of you who may not be familiar with Clean Cities, and I hope that most of you are, more than 75 Clean Cities coalitions around the U.S., representing about 80% of the population. These are really our boots on the ground. And I, one of the takeaways for this presentation is that if you're not involved or working with your local Clean Cities coalition or coordinator, that you will do so. They're the ones who are on top of the funding opportunities coming out of DOE, but they're also very involved with other funding opportunities from other federal agencies. For example, right now, the window is open for the EPA DERA, diesel emission reduction grants, and many of our coordinators are quite active in working with their stakeholders to apply for those opportunities. They're also tied into what may be available at the state level and local level. So this is a great resource that I urge you to take advantage of, not only just because of their being able to help with funding opportunities and keeping you apprised of what's there, but also with these other tools and resources we have. But when it gets to what we do, when we look at the funding opportunities we put on the street, we rely very much on what our Clean Cities coordinators tell us they're hearing from their stakeholders. In fact, one of the tasks our coordinators had for last year was to do listening sessions to really understand from their stakeholders what are some of the challenges, what are some of the technical hurdles or market barriers that need to be overcome to help accelerate deployment and commercialization. So they serve a very valuable feedback role in getting the message out to DOE, to the stakeholders, but also feeding information back to us in terms of what's going on in their markets and their geographic areas. So through the duration of the program, or the life of the program, which now is coming up on 28 years, we have funded over 600 projects and distributed about $500 million. We try to make sure, as I mentioned, that our projects that we have out for funding during a solicitation are really relevant to what's going on in the marketplace. We don't put these out in a vacuum. It's really to understand what are some of the challenges that you, the stakeholders, have. And some of those were mentioned. Rural mobility for new mobility solutions for rural applications. I think someone mentioned, one of the previous speakers mentioned that there are a lot of areas of the country and a lot of fleets that haven't had exposure to these technologies. So how do we make sure we get that out to them? We've done some living labs to really help understand some of the smart mobility work we're doing. And one of our ones we had just this past year was an electric vehicle community partner project. So for the past year, we had $37 million that went out the door and that covered 18 projects around the country. These are the areas where the prime recipients are located, and the ones with the Clean Cities logo indicates that the Clean Cities Coalition there was the prime. Sam mentioned before about being a lead or a sub, and we find with our more than 75 coalitions, some are really have the bandwidth and want to take that lead role, but a lot said, hey, we're more comfortable maybe being a sub. So that kind of gives you a breakdown geographically of where these awards went to last year in the Clean Cities coalitions. This now gets into the subs. We had 32 Clean Cities coalitions that were involved as subawardees in these funding opportunities from last year. And again, you can see a pretty good geographic distribution. So with that, I'll wrap up so we have times for questions. Two resources here to take a look at. cleancities.energy.gov will tell you more about the program and who your local coordinator and coalition is. And then also afdcenergy.gov will help you see a lot of the tools and resources we have online that can be helpful. So with that, I will wrap it up.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Mark. I ask that you all, my panelists, please turn on your webcam now as we go into Q&A.
And suddenly my camera decided to work. Great.
Okay, I want to open up the question. We talk about partnerships. We talk about working with community-based organizations, since they are the ones benefiting from, the community is benefiting from transportation electrification programs. So I want to ask, how relevant or how important is it to bring in partners when designing or developing these programs? And also, what time is it best? Do you bring them in at the beginning, middle, or at the end? And I will open that up to Sam first, and then Dan, you can go next, Maurice, and then Mark.
Yeah, happy to speak to the Symbiote. I think to answer it directly, I think you want to engage with the community you want to serve from the project's impetus. You always run the risk of buying an extremely expensive boulder if these EVs aren't going to end up being used. And so you want to make sure that you're engaged with CBOs early. And the other thing that I would mention with working with community-based organizations is to make sure that you earmark resources to fund their time. So, we're speccing a project with the city right now, and from the beginning, we've earmarked several thousand to set aside specifically to compensate time to ask these very questions. So, you can't assume that it's in an organization's best interest just to work with you. You have to find a way to make sure that they're meaningfully engaged, and that often includes some form of compensation.
I'd echo everything that Sam just said. I never assume that I even close to know everything or can even appreciate the perspective that the partners bring to the table. So if I want to design a program or an offering for a community, I need to know what the community and what the partners in those communities need and want, because there's so many nuances that I can make assumptions out of, but we all know what assumptions do. So I'd rather involve them early and often and that way they can direct our efforts, and we just have a better design program from the get-go.
Yeah, I would just add that, you have to engage them early on. One thing that we did in addition to engaging the community early on was we reached out to a colleague of mine at Oak Ridge National Lab, and he gave us some really nice guidance on some things that could make us successful, that made us successful thus far. So that was really helpful in getting advice from him and some of his colleagues. But yes, you have to engage your community because they're the ones you're doing this for, right? We're not necessarily doing this for NRDC or for Fourth or for PG&E. We're doing this for the community, right? We're the ones that are bringing the resources to them. So they have to tell us really what their needs are. And we have to be able to make sure that we can turn those needs into an actual program that can be successful.
Yeah, I would agree with everything my fellow speaker said. We encourage partnerships. We have found through all the years we've been doing deployment projects, the old adage about the sum being greater than the parts. The successful projects are where you have all the right partners involved. It can't just be one person doing all the heavy lifting. And I think that's a good role that the Clean Cities coordinators play, because at that local level, they can bring together those right players that you need for a successful project. In terms of timing, I know the one thing that we hear, and I talk to my colleagues at the Department of Transportation or EPA, and I'm sure it's true of many of you, whenever there's a funding opportunity on the street, there's never enough time to get it done, right? It's like, oh my God, we just had 2 more weeks, whatever. We actually, in one of our, every year we get all the Clean Cities coordinators together, and so we can, have a chance to have some face-to-face back in the good old days when we could do that, hopefully again soon. But to really understand and share lessons and learned and best practices and what works and what doesn't. And so a few years ago, we really focused on the coalitions that had a lot of success with funding opportunities, not just from us, but from other agencies. And the one thing we found is most of them had, as they called it, kind of a project in the file cabinet ready to go. In other words, they've already had some of these conversations with a lot of their stakeholders about, hey, what if there was what do you need? And what if there was a funding opportunity that could address that? Would you want to be part of that? And it was amazing how that was one common trait through a lot of the ones who have a lot of success, was that ability to kind of have these projects, not they're completely written, but they've socialized them with stakeholders. They may even have some things on paper. So then it speeds up that process when the green light hits that, hey, here's a funding opportunity and the clock's ticking.
Thank you all so much. And I actually have a question in regarding to how do we get the word out? We want to empower these community-based organizations and the community to apply for these grants, even for themselves. How do we get the word out? For instance, Sam, would it be them coming forth, or would we be presenting an opportunity to the community? How does the word get out, and how do we make sure that the word is out when there is a funding opportunity, or we see an opportunity that could benefit a certain community? Maurice, do you want to take this first, or Mark, you could take this first as well?
So I'll jump on that real quick. So I mentioned our Clean Cities coalitions. That's one way. They're in tune to what's going on. We also have, I mentioned the Alternative Fuel Data Center, afdc.energy.gov. We have a tool on there called Laws and Incentives, and it allows you to search incentives and funding opportunities at both the federal level and the state level, and you can filter that out by fuel type, technology type. And then there's another website that's called grants.gov. I don't think you can tie into any state funding opportunities, but grants.gov will show you every federal funding opportunities available, well beyond the scope of vehicles. But what you can do is put some keywords in there, and then that way you'll get pinged if there's a funding opportunity. Because I know that's the one challenge we face is, we don't know 6 months ahead of that time what we're going to be, what kind of funding opportunity we're going to have, especially at DOE. We're subject to budgets from year to year, what leadership wants to do. Obviously, we have a new administration coming in, and they're going to have new goals. So again, it gets to that challenge that the window is normally not big enough in terms of what we'd all like to have time-wise. So those are just a few resources folks might want to take advantage of.
I would add, one thing that's been really helpful are finding, other organizations or entities locally that have the same mission-driven values as the CBOs do. That's really helpful. One mission I remember from Airman, because I used to work there in the past, was powering the quality of life. And it might sound cheeky, but it's true. If you don't have electricity, it's really kind of hard to power the quality of life, right? I mean, so, finding that and making those connections, I think, are very helpful. And also not just looking at the funds that you need to perform a certain task, but the resources that you may need. So, for example, these transportation organizations, they could always use more money, right? But they never have enough vehicles for the services that they need to provide. There are never enough vehicles, right? Yep. So we're not even plugging the hole that exists. We are adding to a deficit that exists, and hopefully this addition to this deficit will help them get to at a level in the near future where they can have the vehicles that they need to provide the services that they need to provide to their residents. I think that's really the biggest thing. It's not just about money; it's the actual resource that you need to provide the service or product that you offer. So,
I like to focus on existing relationships as much as possible when we're getting outreach and getting the word out. Working for PGE, we have a lot of people that interact daily with these communities, either with community leaders, with CBOs directly, or what have you. So I don't want to come in and muddy those waters. I also don't want to come out of nowhere and inundate people with all this information. I think that gets to that feels undignified, and I think that feels really challenging to navigate. So if I have someone that I know already has the ear of some organization, they sit on the board, they work with them frequently, then maybe I say, hey, either can I have an introduction, or here's some information you might want to relay because you know them better than we do. And I think that's really that's how I prefer to operate. Also because sometimes there's a lack of trust. What has PGE done for me other than charge me for electricity? But if there's a good feeling on an individual level and a personal level, then I don't just have the mask of PGE. It's a lot more one-on-one. I think that's the opportunity for a better conversation.
I like that.
Pam, any input on the question, or should we move to the next?
I would just echo what Dan has said. You want to find, I think, the group that may hold the megaphone, so to speak, and be able to communicate with other smaller organizations within the ecosystem you want to reach out to.
Thank you. My next question, and I know we're running short on time. If we did not get through any of your questions, I did see some of our panelists answering some of the attendee questions, but we will get an opportunity through the recap email for you all to ask your questions and connect with our speakers more. This question, how do we overcome the gap between funded pilots and financially sustainable programs? Maybe having it longer than 3 years and making it more of a staple in the community. Dan, do you want to take this one first?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the Drive Change Fund is a little bit of a pilot. This is only our third year, and we kind of built it on the fly in 2019. And we don't have, an infinite funding source to know we're going to be doing it forever. But I think part of what you try and do is you build a good structure. You build it in a structure of, this is our outreach ideas. These are the people we're going to be working with. This is the reporting. You try to build in those things, build it as if it's going to be around forever. And that way that allows you to lean into those structures and involve stakeholders, involve partners, so that it's going to be happening. In terms of funding individual projects, we require a 10-year, once a year annual report with our partners. So that way we have that check-in, because a lot of these organizations don't have TE expertise or experience. So we're not looking to say, are you doing it right? But we're looking to say, hey, if your charger's not working, if your vehicle isn't sounding right, come to us as technical experts and let us make sure this project is long-term and not just something, the expensive boulder analogy from earlier. It doesn't just sit in the parking lot. We're not trying to catch somebody doing something wrong. We are stakeholders, and we're engaged in this. So we want them to be longer lasting than just a 1-year pilot that then gets a nice picture and put on a shelf.
Anyone else have any addition to that question?
I would say you have to. Oh, go on, Maurice.
No, I was just going to quickly say that we're really early on, so we're not there yet. But for me, what I can see are those relationships that are being built on top of ones that already exist. So Ameren is a community. I mean, is a investor-owned utility here in the St. Louis region, but they already have connections with CBOs and others. But this type of connection is new. So
I would just add, you want to ask the hard question. Is this a pilot that someone else is going to be willing to pay for? And if so, who is that next round of funding going to come from? So really identifying, are you answering a question? Are you solving a need? And if so, who has that need and who's willing to pay for it?
Thank you. My last question to you all is, if you have one piece of advice, one lesson learned, one best practice, one key takeaway that you would like to give our audience today, and whether it's funding opportunities or designing the program, what would that be? And I will go for Mark, Maurice, Dan, and then Sam.
Don't be afraid to ask for help or ask questions. Oftentimes I hear from somebody after we've made an award or awards, and they said, geez, I didn't realize that, this is what you wanted, and now I saw it, and ask a question. Every funding opportunity we put out there, we have an email address where if somebody's not sure about something and needs some clarification, they can ask a question. So I would say, don't be afraid to ask for help during this process. There are a lot of people out there who want to help you, and from our standpoint, we want project applications that can be successful and projects that can be successful. So don't be shy.
I would just add on top of Mark, I think it's better to over communicate than under communicate, because if you don't clarify things early on, you could run into a lot of mess, right? And so that's what we've done, working with Fourth, or working with the city, or working with the CBOs, working with Ameren, just making sure, or working with AMPUP, just make sure we over communicate so people know this is where I stand, this is where I am, or this is where something is at this point in time, right? Or if this is a risk, help the other person identify that risk if they may not see that risk, right? Because where they may not be able to pick up at this time because they might be, they might be focusing on something that's necessary for reporting, right? But if I'm here locally, I can help with certain things that they just physically cannot do right now. So I think that's another tidbit too to be aware of.
Thank you. Yeah.
Those are both great. What I would say is, if it doesn't exist, don't be afraid to build it. I work for a regulated utility. This is not our bread and butter, but we decided that this was important to us, and we carved it out, and we found ways to do this, and spun out a lot of other interesting programs that are supporting, our communities in the same way. So it's not easy. It's not something that people are going to want to jump on board, but it's exciting, it's interesting, it's innovative, and it's way too important just to say, well, we don't have it. It's never been done before, so we shouldn't do it. If you believe in it, build it. I think that's really critical.
And I would just add, know your organization, know your team's strengths, and make sure that you find really great partners that complement it. So go after things with teams that make a lot of sense.
Thank you so much to the panelists, and thank you all for staying with us 4 minutes over our allotted time for this webinar. I really appreciate it. And to the attendees today, thank you so much for joining us. Like I mentioned, we will be sharing out a webinar recap that will have some additional resources, as well as the presentation decks and the recording from this today. It's not morning for everybody. And we hope you're able to join us for our next webinar in our series, Next Level Power Inductive Charging, on Tuesday, February 23rd. We will be joined by panelists to discuss the wireless charging standards, current pilots, programs, and more on this panel. So we do hope you're able to join us. And if you have any topic suggestions or anything you would like for it to cover, please feel free to reach out to myself or the info@fourthmobility.org. We love taking topics. We want to cover more innovative topics in the transportation, electrification, clean transportation ecosystem. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to my panelists today, and we hope you have a good rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, everybody.